Black Panther 2 is a lot of things. It's a movie with really good performances. It's a movie that has really imaginative, creative, and high-quality production design. It's a movie that's a heartfelt tribute to Chadwick Boseman, who died tragically young. Overall, it's really fun, above-average Marvel fare. But what it's not is radical or revolutionary. Now, I'm not really talking about representation here. A movie that is approaching $750 million at the box office starring mostly black women is something worth celebrating. What I'm talking about more is how there's this sense that when you talk about Black Panther films or when you see a Black Panther film, that you're somehow participating in a critique of colonialism or of the global corporate order, or that somehow these films are a site wherein the global north can come to terms with its sins, that these movies are an opportunity for us to show our revulsion at our colonial past. Basically, that these films are somehow ideologically rebellious, that their ideas are a threat to the status quo, and that they might empower people to challenge the system. Well, again, these movies are a lot of things, but it's definitely not that. Really, it's not that. In fact, there's an argument to be made that it's actually the exact opposite. And these are the ideas that were just constantly ponging back and forth in my brain as I was watching the movie. And so for this video, I'm going to be sharing these ideas to kind of show you where my mind was at when I was watching the movies. Now, we're going to be talking about ideology in this video. And when I say ideology, I mean ideology specifically in the Marxist sense and the Marxist tradition. Now, I'm going to explain what that means. But first, I just want to say I know that Marx is a cultural hot topic these days, or actually it's probably always been like that. But even if you're somebody who despises him or finds yourself among the circles of people who speak about him as if he's some kind of a demon, that's fine, you can continue to believe that, but I'd ask you to continue watching the video just as kind of an agnostic educational thing. I mean, hey, if it's your enemy, it's always good to learn more about your enemy, right? Keep your enemies closer, whatever that saying is. Anyway, in Marx, there is the base and the superstructure. The base is basically the economic structure. It's where the forces and relations of production exist. So it's the factories, it's the people who own them, etc. And then the superstructure is where things like law, religion, and culture exist. And the superstructure is there to support the base. So things like culture and religion are there to create ideas that legitimize the base, or basically the existing class order, and this is known as ideology. The idea is that those who control material production also control mental production. Alright, so let's talk about the first movie. In the first movie, we have T'Challa, who's the king of Wakanda, and Wakanda is this very rich, very advanced society that has vibranium, which is the most powerful asset resource in the world. And so he also has this cousin named Killmonger, and Killmonger believes that Wakanda should stop isolating itself and it should use its vast resources and military might to send weapons to the other dispossessed people of the world that have been harmed by the global colonial order, and that they should rise up against their oppressors and overthrow them. But ultimately, the notion of overthrowing the world order violently is deemed too radical, and Killmonger is defeated by T'Challa. And then T'Challa is inspired to move away from his isolationist stance and to decide that, you know what, the best that we can do is try to improve the world and improve people's lives, including and especially the dispossessed, by doing it within the existing world order, within the existing current framework. Now, there's two ways to think of this. The first one is within the standard Marxist critique of ideology, because herein we say that the ideology culture is there to support and validate the system. So here we have a movie where there is a threat to the system. There's somebody who's not only brutally criticizing the system, but suggesting that it be violently overthrown, and our protagonist proves him wrong and says, no, that's not the right way to go about it, and then ultimately says that the best way to go forward is to improve things within the existing order. So that's very literal in the sense that culture is teaching us that the existing order is the way to go. That would be a standard Marxist reading. But the second way to think about it is a more cynical critique of ideology. So let's say that you watch Black Panther, and even though T'Challa wins, you come away with the ideas that Killmonger propagated. You say that, you know what, I know it's a Hollywood movie and that it has to have a nice ending, but ultimately I still come away having learned what Killmonger was saying, that the colonial world order is unjust and that it needs to be violently overthrown. Let's say that that's what you come away with. But through the lens of ideological cynicism, even that wouldn't threaten the system. In fact, it would only make it stronger, because through that lens, criticizing the system is ultimately the thing that allows the system to remain strong and to propagate itself. This is an idea made popular by one of my favorite philosophers, Slavoj Zizek, who I'm sure you've heard me talk about, whether it's on my Twitch stream or here on this channel or elsewhere. But he basically believes that, unlike the days of Marx, ideology works different today. In the days of Marx, it was more like people didn't know what they were doing and yet they did it. But Zizek believes that today ideology works much more cynically. It's rather that people know exactly what they're doing, and yet they do it anyway. Zizek believes that these kind of out-in-the-open critiques of the system are actually evidence of the system's strength. Remember that an ideology's job is to secure consent for the current ruling order, basically to convince people to allow the current order to continue in power. But Zizek says that people will only do that if, in doing so, they are expressing their freedom to do otherwise. You can't just brainwash people into thinking a single way and create these unthinking automatons. It's much more effective if you convince people that they are allowing the power to stay in place. Now, granted, this power to actually make a change in the system is largely an illusion. So you show them the brutal criticism of the system, and then them identifying with that claim to greater justice is what allows them to go on living within the system unchanged, and actually quells their revolutionary fervor to actually change it, because they feel good enough just with the knowledge of knowing that they may have chosen otherwise. So through a classic Marxist framework, which is again, they don't know it, yet they do it, it would be, they don't know it, but they have been convinced that Killmonger is wrong and T'Challa is right, and that the best way for humanity to move forward is to make incremental improvements within the existing system. Whereas in Zizek's formulation of cynical ideology, which is again, I know exactly what I'm doing and yet I still do it, it would be, I know that Killmonger is right about the ills and sins of colonial oppression, yet I will still buy iPhones that are made using coltan sourced unethically from the Congo, because at least I feel guilty. But I think this formulation of cynical ideology was even more apparent in the second movie, because in the second movie it begins with us learning that the global order that T'Challa put his faith into has been corrupt, and a lot of these countries are still trying to steal vibranium from wherever they can do it, and they're even repeating the colonial sins that they did in the past, which is what Namor and his people are so afraid of. In fact, the whole conflict of the movie is that Namor and the Talokans are trying to stay hidden because they know that the Western powers will plunder their lands and commit the same sins that they did on their ancestors. And here's what's really interesting, that perhaps more explicitly this time than in the first movie, the bad guy really is the Western world, the current globalist world order, and yet there's really no alternative that's presented. And all the time you see in leftist circles, perhaps even sometimes Marxist circles, you hear the criticism that our entertainment, our art, we don't have the creativity to imagine another world. And I think it's most evident here in Black Panther 2, where we have these two victims just warring at each other without even the possibility of actually usurping or fighting the actual bad guy. The source of all the negative conflict, the current global order, isn't even really discussed. And so we have a movie where the conflict is basically two people warring against each other, but their actual ills lay elsewhere in a realm that is apparently not challengeable. Plus, as I mentioned in my other Black Panther video, this time they're doubling down on this notion of depicting cultures that have been negatively affected by colonialism, this time with the Talokans, who are the descendants of the Mayans and the Aztecs. And that's kind of the token gesture, that criticism toward the colonial order with no actual alternative presented. So again, under Zizek's formulation, the film gives us the guilt. It gives us the criticism of the order that gives us the ability to think that we have the choice in allowing this order. So to put literally in Zizek's formula, which is again, I know exactly what I'm doing, but I do it anyway, it would be something like, I know that I participate in a global order that has historically and today oppresses people of the global south like the fictional Talokans, but but I will still continue to participate in this order because there are no alternatives, and at least I feel guilty. In this era of cynical ideology, which I find to be a very, very convincing argument, criticizing the system is what gives the system power. And it's because of that that I really can't take any claims that Black Panther is actually empowering people to threaten the system or to improve the system. It's why I can't really take that seriously. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to check me out on Twitch. Right now I'm playing God of War Ragnarok, and it is so good. Link is in the description. I'm playing Mondays and Thursdays at, I think, 9 a.m. Pacific or 8 a.m. Pacific. Be sure to check the schedule. Thanks a lot, guys, for watching, and stay subscribed or subscribe if you want to see more content. Thanks a lot, guys. Peace.